The morning sun slipped through the tall glass windows of the office, painting soft golden lines across the floor. The air carried a quiet hum, the sound of printers starting up, the low chatter of coworkers, and the gentle rhythm of typing keys. It was another ordinary morning at Silverline Designs, a company that lived on deadlines and coffee. Amira walked in holding her usual cup, steam curling around her fingers. She wore a warm smile, her hair tied neatly and her eyes still heavy with sleep. She had always loved mornings like this, peaceful, safe, and filled with that slow kind of hope that came before a busy day. She passed the boss's office, the one with the glass walls, and saw him inside. Mr. Adrian Hale, the company's youngest manager, was already at his desk. His sleeves were rolled up, tie loose, and his focus sharp as always. He looked like someone carved from calm itself. Every woman in the office had talked about him at least once, about his charm, his quiet authority, and the mystery in his eyes. Amira wasn't immune to it either. At her desk, her friend Lena leaned close, whispering behind a hand. "He's here early again. Look at him. He doesn't even blink when he's working." Amira giggled softly. "I know, he's like a machine." Lena grinned. "So come on, tell me the truth. You think he's hot, right?" Amira laughed, half whispering, half teasing. "Of course he's hot, but he's gay. Everyone knows that." The words were light, careless, meant only for fun. They floated into the air like smoke. The two women laughed, and Amira went back to her computer, unaware that something heavy had just landed beyond her little bubble of jokes. Behind the glass, Adrian looked up. He had been standing near the door, file in hand, ready to step out, but he froze when he heard his name in that sentence. Her voice had carried, clear enough to reach him. For a moment he didn't move. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking toward the two women. He didn't say anything, didn't show anger, only a brief flicker of something deeper. Maybe hurt, maybe surprise. He turned back toward his desk, setting the file down slowly. The office sounds seemed to fade, replaced by a soft ringing in his ears. He wasn't angry. He'd heard worse rumors before, but hearing it from her, of all people, felt different. Amira noticed movement in the corner of her eye and glanced up. Their eyes met through the glass. Her smile vanished. Adrian's gaze was steady, unreadable. He held it for just a second, no expression, no words, then turned away, picking up a pen and returning to his papers. But that 1 second felt like a minute stretched thin. Her heart started to pound. Oh no, did he hear that? She felt heat crawl up her neck. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tried to focus on her screen. The office now felt too quiet, too sharp. The laughter from a few minutes ago had turned into something heavy in her chest. Lena leaned over again, whispering, "You okay?" Amira forced a small smile. "Yeah, I think he heard me." Lena's eyes widened. "No way, from there?" Amira nodded. "The glass. It's not soundproof." For the rest of the morning she could barely type. Every time Adrian passed her desk, her stomach twisted. He didn't look at her, not even once. Not a single glance. That silence said more than words could. By noon, Amira couldn't take it anymore. She escaped to the break room, sitting by the window with her untouched sandwich. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, people laughed, sunlight danced on steel. But her world had gone small, trapped inside that one careless sentence. She kept replaying it. The joke, the laughter, his face, that quiet, piercing look. A soft knock made her look up. Adrian stood by the door, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a mug of coffee. Her heart jumped so hard she nearly spilled her drink. "Amira," he said in that calm, steady tone of his, "can we talk for a moment?" She froze. Her throat went dry. Yes." "Of course." He stepped in, the door clicking shut behind him. The air in the small room felt suddenly charged. The sound of the city faded, replaced by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink as he set his mug on the counter. He looked at her, not unkindly, but deeply. "I heard something this morning," he began slowly. "About me?" Amira's stomach dropped. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Adrian didn't sound angry, just tired. "People talk. I'm used to it, but I didn't expect it from you." The room seemed to shrink around them. Her eyes burned with shame. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It was just a stupid joke." He gave a small nod. "I know." He turned slightly, his voice soft but firm. But words travel differently when they come from someone who doesn't mean to hurt. There was no lecture, no scolding. Just truth, plain and quiet. That somehow hurt more. He took his coffee and left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Amira sat still, staring at the empty space where he'd stood. The hum of the refrigerator returned, slow and steady. And for the first time that morning, the sunlight didn't feel warm anymore. The next morning came with the same soft light, but for Amira, the warmth of it was gone. The office felt different, colder somehow, though nothing had really changed. The same smell of coffee drifted through the air, the same quiet chatter of people starting their day, the same slow rhythm of keys tapping and papers shuffling. Yet every sound seemed distant to her now. She sat at her desk, pretending to focus on the numbers glowing on her screen. Her fingers moved, but her mind was stuck on one moment, that look. The way Adrian had met her eyes yesterday, calm yet cutting. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't scolded her, but the silence that followed had been louder than any argument. Lena noticed her silence. "You still thinking about it?" she whispered, leaning closer. Amira nodded weakly. He heard everything, Lena, every word. And I just stood there laughing like an idiot. Lena gave her a sympathetic smile. "He's a boss, Amira. He's probably forgotten it already." But Amira knew better. The memory of his voice, "I didn't expect it from you," had stayed with her all night. She glanced toward his office. The glass walls glimmered with morning light. He was there, as usual, focused on a report. His face was calm, his movements precise, as if nothing had ever happened. But that made her feel even worse. When he finally stepped out holding a folder, the soft thud of his shoes echoed in the open space. Everyone greeted him, polite nods, soft, "Good morning, sir." He responded to each one with his usual gentle tone. Then his eyes reached her desk. For one long, breathless second, he stopped. Amira froze. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might be audible. Their eyes met. That silent look again. Not angry, not cold, just deep and unreadable. It felt like he was searching for something in her face, some explanation or truth. Then just as slowly, he looked away and continued walking toward the conference room. The moment lasted less than 5 seconds, but to her it felt endless. She let out a shaky breath, fingers tightening around her pen. All day she kept noticing him, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't help it. The way he spoke in meetings, calm but firm. The way he smiled at the intern who brought the wrong files, patient and kind. The way he rubbed his forehead when lost in thought. He was exactly the same man as before. But now she saw the weight he carried. By noon, she couldn't take the tension anymore. When she passed by his office on her way to the printer, she hesitated. He was standing by the window, sunlight touching the side of his face. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up, eyes on the city below. He looked peaceful and tired at the same time, like someone who had learned to hide too many feelings under one calm expression. She wanted to say something. Anything. "Sir?" she said softly. He turned. "Yes?" For a second she almost lost her courage. I wanted to apologize again. For what I said." He studied her face quietly, not moving. "You already did, Amira." "I know," she said, her voice small. "But I still feel bad. It was wrong." There was a pause. Then he sighed, not in irritation but in thought. "People say things, we all do. What matters is what we learn after we say them." His voice was calm, even gentle, but his eyes, they carried a sadness she hadn't seen before. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I know," he said again. And this time there was a faint smile. "Let's just forget it happened." He turned back to the window. The golden light washed over his shoulders. For a second she thought she saw something vulnerable in his reflection. Something lonely. She wanted to ask, "Why did it hurt you so much?" But she didn't dare. Instead she nodded quietly. "Thank you, sir." He gave a small nod, eyes still on the city. "Get back to work, Amira." She left the room, her heartbeat still racing. The door closed softly behind her, but the moment stayed. That quiet conversation that somehow felt heavier than all her other days at work combined. That evening, when most of the office had emptied, she stayed late to finish a report. The soundscape of the building had changed. Printers clicking off, distant footsteps echoing, the occasional hum of the vending machine. The night air carried a stillness that was both calm and lonely. She looked up once and saw him again, through the glass, sitting alone at his desk. His lamp cast a warm pool of light on his papers. He looked lost in thought, his face half-shadowed. Something about him didn't feel like the boss in that moment. He looked human, just a man. Amira stared for a moment too long before quickly looking back at her screen. And even though nothing was said, nothing happened, that silent look between them. Earlier that day kept replaying in her mind. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rejection. It was something else. Something she couldn't name yet, but it made her chest ache in a strange, quiet way. The elevator chimed in the distance. Adrian finally stood, picked up his coat, and turned off the light. Before leaving, his gaze drifted toward her desk, just for a moment. Their eyes met again through the glass. This time his look was softer. Almost kind, and then he walked away, footsteps fading down the hall. Amira sat still long after he'd gone, the office dim and empty around her. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioner, steady, calm, and lonely. But inside her heart, something had begun to stir, something that would not stay quiet for long. The next day, the weather shifted. Clouds moved across the sky, dimming the sunlight that usually filled the office. The world outside looked softer, gray, quiet, and thoughtful. It was the kind of morning that made people speak in lower voices, walk a little slower, and think a little deeper. Amira arrived earlier than usual. She needed to do something she had been rehearsing in her mind since last night, something simple yet terrifying. She wanted to talk to him again, not just to say sorry like before, but to say it right, to tell him she understood now, even if only a little, how her careless words might have felt. The office was nearly empty. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of a few keyboards and the faint hum of the coffee machine. Adrian's office door was open. He sat by the window typing quietly, his face calm in the soft light. For a few seconds she watched him from afar. He looked peaceful, focused, distant, but she remembered his voice from that day. Words travel differently when they come from someone who doesn't mean to hurt. That single line had replayed in her head all night. She took a slow breath, smoothing her blouse, and walked toward his door. Her heels made a gentle tapping sound against the floor. "Sir?" she said softly. He looked up immediately. His eyes, calm, gray, and sharp, lifted from the screen to her face. "Amira," he said simply, tone neutral but not cold. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" He leaned back slightly, studying her for a brief second before nodding. "Of course. Come in." She stepped inside, closing the door halfway behind her. The quiet of the room wrapped around them, the low hum of the air conditioner, the distant tick of the wall clock, and the faint buzz of rain starting outside the glass. Amira's voice came out softer than she expected. "I just wanted to apologize again. I know I already said it, but I need to say it properly." Adrian's expression didn't change, but his eyes softened slightly. "Go on." "I spoke without thinking," she continued, her fingers fidgeting slightly. "And I said something that wasn't fair. I didn't mean to hurt you. She paused, looking for the right words. It was meant as a joke, but now I realize it wasn't funny. It was personal, and it wasn't my place. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, Adrian put down his pen. "You've been thinking about this a lot." She gave a shy smile. "Yes, too much, maybe." He looked down, tapping his pen lightly against the desk, then met her gaze again. "People don't often think twice after saying something careless. You did. That says enough." Amira let out a small breath of relief. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a lot," he nodded. "It's all right, Amira." Then, after a pause, his tone softened further. "I've dealt with assumptions before. People love to make stories about things they don't understand. It doesn't bother me anymore. Not the way it used to." There was something in his voice and something heavier beneath the calm. A shadow of tiredness, maybe pain. She hesitated, then asked softly, "It used to bother you?" He gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "When I was younger, yes. When I cared too much about what people said. But life teaches you to carry silence like armor." Those words hit her deeper than she expected. She looked at him, really looked this time, at the calm mask, the gentle voice, the quiet eyes. and she realized that behind all that control, there was a person who had probably been judged too many times. "I'm sorry for being part of that noise," she whispered. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, and then something subtle changed in his expression, like a door opening just slightly. "You're not part of the noise anymore." For a heartbeat, the air between them felt different, softer, closer. Rain began tapping gently against the windows, filling the silence with a calm rhythm. The light dimmed, turning the office into a small cocoon of gray warmth. Amira smiled faintly. "I brought you coffee. Thought it might help smooth things over." She lifted the cup she'd been hiding behind her back and placed it on his desk. "Black, no sugar, so right?" Adrian blinked, a hint of surprise crossing his face before a small laugh escaped him, quiet and genuine. "You pay attention." "I try," she said softly, her lips curving. He picked up the cup, taking a slow sip, eyes still on her. "Thank you, Amira." "You're welcome, sir." Her voice trembled just slightly, and not from fear but from something gentler. Something she didn't want to name yet. For a moment neither spoke. The soundscape carried only the soft rain, the quiet ticking of the clock, and the faint sound of his breath. Finally he set the cup down and said, "Let's call it even." She smiled, and small, shy, but bright. "Even." As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Amira." She looked back. "Yes?" His eyes met hers again, that same unreadable gray. "Don't let small things weigh you down. You're better than that." Her heart fluttered. She nodded. "I'll try." He gave the smallest smile, the kind that looked like it cost him something but was worth it. Amira walked out of his office, her pulse still racing. She could still feel the warmth of his voice in her ears, the quiet steadiness of his gaze. Back at her desk, Lena whispered, "You look like you just met a movie star." Amira only smiled faintly and looked toward his office one more time. Behind the glass, Adrian had gone back to work, calm, composed. But every now and then he looked up from his papers, eyes softening as they landed on her desk. Neither of them said another word that day, but for the first time since that embarrassing moment, the silence between them didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like the beginning of something they both couldn't quite name. The rain had passed by the next morning, leaving the world washed clean. The city outside shimmered with sunlight bouncing off wet streets, and the air smelled new, fresh, a little sweet, and filled with that quiet calm that follows after a storm. In the office, everything was back to its usual rhythm, the sound of typing, chairs rolling, printers humming, and the faint melody of someone's playlist drifting from a corner desk. Yet for Amira, something had shifted. Not in the world, but inside her. Since that talk with Adrian, she felt lighter, but also strangely aware of him. It was as if the apology had removed one wall but built another, an invisible one made of silence, curiosity, and something she couldn't quite name. Around mid-morning, she stood near the pantry counter, waiting for the coffee machine to finish its slow work. The aroma filled the air, warm and rich. She was lost in thought when she heard his voice. "Still prefer the strongest blend, don't you?" Her heart jumped. She turned quickly. Adrian stood by the doorway, hands in his pockets, that familiar calmness in his posture. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket today, just a simple shirt with sleeves rolled halfway up. The sunlight from the window brushed against his face, making him look softer than usual. Amira smiled nervously. "I guess I do. Coffee stronger than the mood of this office," he chuckled softly, stepping closer. "That's one way to survive here." The faint sound of the machine filled the silence between them. She took her cup and handed him the next one from the tray. "Here," she said quietly. "Black, no sugar, so right?" He accepted it, fingers brushing lightly against hers. "Just for a moment." A short electric second that made her pulse skip. "Right," he said with a small nod. They both stood side by side, sipping in silence. Around them, the office buzzed faintly, but here, in this corner, it felt like a pause in time. After a while, she said softly, "Can I ask you something?" He turned his head slightly. "Of course. Why do you never talk about yourself?" The question hung in the air like a fragile thread. Adrian looked thoughtful for a moment, then smiled. Not coldly, but with the kind of weariness that hides something deeper. "Because people don't really want to hear. They want stories that match what they already believe. But I want to hear. she said quickly before she could stop herself. He looked at her, really looked. Why? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe because you don't talk much, and people who stay quiet usually have the most to say. That made him smile again, this time softer, almost amused. You notice too much, Amira. Maybe, she said with a shy shrug. Maybe I just care too much. A silence followed, not heavy, but charged with quiet understanding. Finally, he said, I used to care what people thought, especially about my life, but caring too much can turn into a kind of prison, so I learned to live quietly. His voice was low, almost like he was talking to himself. Rumors don't bother me anymore. They used to. They made me angry, even ashamed sometimes. But now I just let them exist. They say what they want and I go on. Amira stared at her cup. That sounds lonely. He nodded slowly. It is. But peace often sounds like loneliness to others. His words struck her hard in a way she couldn't explain. She looked at him, wanting to say something, to tell him he didn't deserve to be that lonely. But her lips stayed still. The sound of the clock on the wall filled the silence. One slow tick after another. Then quietly, she said, For what? It's worth I don't think you're lonely because of who you are. I think you just don't let people in. He raised an eyebrow, amused. You think you know me already? She smiled faintly. No, but I'd like to. His expression softened. The moment lingered, long enough for her to notice how close they were standing now. His cologne mixed with the scent of coffee and rain, the air between them warm and fragile. You're brave, he said quietly. Most people avoid asking. I guess I'm not most people, she whispered back. For a second, neither of them moved. The noise of the office faded into nothing. It was just the two of them. The sound of breath, the faint hum of the lights, and the slow drip from the coffee machine. Then, as if remembering where they were, he stepped back a little, clearing his throat. We should get back to work, he said, his tone soft but steady. Right, she murmured, still feeling her heartbeat in her throat. He took one last sip, then smiled. A real, small smile that touched his eyes this time. Thank you for the coffee, Amira. You're welcome, sir. He turned to leave but paused by the door. And Amira, he said over his shoulder. Yes? Don't let this place make you forget your softness. It's rare here. And just like that, he was gone. Leaving. Her standing there, coffee cup still warm in her hand, her heart a little too full. She exhaled slowly, feeling something shift again inside her. A pull she couldn't explain, a tenderness that both comforted and scared her. Back at her desk, Lena gave her a curious look. You've been gone a while, she teased. Amira smiled faintly. Just coffee, she said, but her voice trembled slightly, betraying more than she meant to, because in that short break, with nothing but coffee and quiet words, something real had begun to grow, something that neither of them had planned, and both of them were trying not to name. But deep down she knew, from that moment on, nothing between them would ever be the same. The day stretched longer than usual. By the time most of the office lights began to dim and chairs rolled back into place, Amira was still at her desk. Her computer screen glowed faintly in the quiet room, its reflection flickering in her tired eyes. She could hear the faint rain returning outside, soft, steady, the kind that sounded like whispers against the glass. Everyone had left except a few workers from another department packing up boxes. Their laughter echoed faintly through the corridor before the elevator doors closed, and then silence. Real silence. The kind that fills an empty space with its own heartbeat. Amira sighed, leaning back in her chair. Just one more report, she whispered to herself. She didn't really need to stay, but something about the stillness of the office comforted her. Or maybe she was waiting for something she didn't want to admit. Across the floor, a soft light still glowed in Adrian's office. Through the half-closed blinds, she could see him sitting at his desk, coat off, sleeves rolled up, head slightly tilted as he read through a document. The yellow desk lamp framed him in warm light, softening his sharp features. His tie hung loose around his neck, his hair a little out of place, the kind of imperfection that made him seem more human than boss-like. Amira hesitated for a moment, then stood up, clutching a file to her chest. Her footsteps echoed lightly across the empty space as she walked toward his office. She knocked gently. "Sir?" He looked up, surprised, then smiled faintly. "You're still here?" "So are you," she replied, her voice calm but teasing. He leaned back in his chair. "Touché. What's keeping you?" "This report," she said, holding up the file like proof. "I wanted to finish it tonight. It's easier when no one's talking or printing or running around." Adrian nodded. "Silence can be addictive. Especially your kind of silence," she said before realizing how that sounded. She quickly looked down. "I mean, the office kind. The quiet." He chuckled softly, a sound that felt like warmth in the still air. "It's all right, Amira, I know what you meant." She smiled shyly, her fingers tracing the file's edge. "Would you like some help with yours? I mean, since you're still working too." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, if you don't mind the company." "I don't," she said. And she meant it. She sat across from him, the desk between them covered in papers, coffee mugs, and the soft light of the lamp. Outside, the rain deepened, drumming gently against the windows. They worked quietly for a while. Just the soft tapping of keys, the scratch of his pen, the hum of the air conditioner. Every few minutes their eyes would meet across the desk, and neither would look away immediately. There was no awkwardness. Now, just a quiet comfort, a rhythm they both seemed to understand. After a while, Amira stretched, yawning softly. "I think I've been staring at this screen too long." Adrian smiled, putting down his pen. "You've done enough. Go home, Amira." She shook her head lightly. "Only if you do." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you giving me orders now?" She grinned, her tone playful. "Maybe." He leaned back, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You're brave when the office is empty. And you're kinder when no one's watching," she said without thinking. The words hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. His smile faded slightly, not in displeasure but in reflection. "Maybe you're right." The room felt warmer now, the air softer, like the space between words had grown alive. After a few seconds, he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain. "It's strange," he said quietly, "how peaceful the city looks from up here at night. You'd never guess how much chaos hides inside it." Amira watched him, her heart slow and heavy. "Maybe peace and chaos always live together," she said softly. "You just notice whichever one you need most." He turned toward her, eyes meeting hers again. "And which one do you notice right now?" She hesitated, the truth too close to her lips. "Peace," she whispered finally. For a moment, his gaze softened completely. The rain filled the silence between them, gentle and steady. He took a step closer to her, not too close, just enough that she could feel the quiet weight of his presence. "You have a strange way of making silence feel full," he said softly. Her breath caught. "And you have a strange way of making it hard to leave." A faint smile touched his lips. "Dangerous combination." "Maybe," she whispered, "but it doesn't feel wrong." The light flickered slightly, shadows moving across the floor. The world outside the glass was blurred. Just two figures standing in a quiet office, the sound of rain wrapping them in a moment that wasn't supposed to happen, but did anyway. Adrian took a slow breath, then said quietly, "You should go before we forget it's still work hours." She smiled gently. "You're right." But neither of them moved right away. Finally, he said, "Good night, Amira." "Good night, sir." As she turned to leave, her hand brushed the edge of the door. Behind her, his voice came softly, almost a whisper. "Thank you for staying." She turned slightly, enough to meet his eyes once more. "Anytime," she said, and then walked out. The door closed softly behind her, but the warmth of that moment stayed. Down the hall, her footsteps echoed against the polished floor. In her chest, her heart still beat fast, not from fear or guilt, but from something that had quietly begun, to bloom, steady and unstoppable, like rain growing into a storm. And inside his office, Adrian stood by the window, staring into the night, the faintest smile on his face, and a single thought repeating in his mind. She wasn't supposed to matter this much. The next morning carried a soft chill, the kind that made people wrap their hands around warm cups and move a little slower. The office smelled of coffee and printer ink, familiar, ordinary, yet somehow different for Amira. The quiet from last night still clung to her like perfume. She hadn't slept much, replaying every moment between her and Adrian, the laughter, the silence, the way he had looked at her before saying goodnight. She told herself it was nothing, just a kind gesture, just human warmth in an empty office. But her heart didn't believe her. When she reached her desk, she noticed a small, sticky note on top of her keyboard. The handwriting was neat, angled slightly to the right. Good work on the report. You made my job easier. A.H. She stared at it for a few seconds, unable to stop the small smile that tugged at her lips. It wasn't much, just words. But from him, it felt like a secret message. Lena noticed the smile right away. Who's making you grin like that? Amira quickly folded the note, hiding it under a folder. No one. Uh-huh, Lena teased, raising an eyebrow. You and that mysterious smile. You've got a crush. Amira shook her head, laughing softly. Please, he's my boss. I don't do crushes on bosses. But even as she said it, her heart betrayed her. All morning, she caught herself glancing toward his office. He seemed as composed as ever, working through files, giving instructions, moving between desks with calm authority. But every now and then she'd catch him looking her way too, his gaze lingering for just a second longer than necessary. And in those tiny moments, the air seemed to shift. At lunch, the team gathered in the small office cafe. The chatter was light and playful, people laughing over bad coffee and gossiping about weekend plans. Amira joined them, smiling, though her attention kept drifting toward the glass door. She didn't notice when Adrian walked in. He moved quietly, like he always did, heading straight to the coffee machine. Conversations dimmed for a second as people straightened up. He had that effect on everyone. But his eyes weren't on the crowd. They found her almost instantly. Amira froze mid-sentence. Their eyes met. A quiet, steady connection that neither of them tried to hide this time. Lena nudged her gently under the table. He's looking right at you, she whispered. Amira forced a laugh. He looks at everyone. Not like that, Lena muttered. Adrian poured his coffee, gave a polite nod to the team, then, to everyone's surprise, walked over to their table. Mind if I join you for a moment? He asked. The team exchanged quick glances. Of course, sir, one of them said eagerly, shifting to make space. He sat down, calm and composed, sipping his coffee. I wanted to thank everyone for the extra hours this week, he said evenly. You've all been doing great work. A few polite thank you. Sir, murmurs followed. Then his eyes moved toward Amira again, and the rest of the world seemed to fade. You especially, he added quietly. You stayed late last night, didn't you? Amira's heart stumbled. Yes, sir. I just wanted to finish the report. And you did, he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. Perfectly, she couldn't look away. That one word, perfectly, carried something unspoken, something warm that made her chest ache. The others barely noticed, but to her the air had changed again. It was subtle, like static before a storm. When he stood to leave, he added, Don't forget to take breaks, Amira. Work isn't worth losing your light over. And just like that, he was gone, leaving a ripple of whispers and knowing glances behind. Lena turned to her the moment he left. Oh, you're in trouble, Amira blinked. What do you mean? That man has the softest voice I've ever heard, and he only uses it when he cares about something. Amira laughed it off, but her cheeks were warm. You're imagining things. But that night as she lay in bed, she heard his voice again, low, calm, and gentle. Don't lose your light. The next few days passed in that strange, sweet tension. They spoke more often now, Small exchanges about work that somehow drifted into things that weren't about work at all. Books, music, the city, silence. Each conversation left a trace of warmth, a quiet closeness that neither of them named aloud. One evening, she stayed back again to finish some revisions. As she walked past his office, she noticed him staring at his computer, brow furrowed. She hesitated at the door. "Still working?" He looked up, smiling tiredly. "Trying to. Maybe you need coffee," she said. He chuckled. "Maybe I just need to stop thinking." She stepped inside, setting her file down. "You could try talking instead." He tilted his head. "To who?" "To me," she said softly. He studied her face for a moment. "You really don't like silence, do you?" She smiled faintly. "Only when it hides something." For a heartbeat, the world stilled again. His eyes met hers, that steady, unreadable gaze that always seemed to reach deeper than words. Then with a quiet, almost playful tone, he said, "Still think I'm gay?" Amira froze. The question hit her like a spark in the dark. Her breath caught, and for a second she couldn't speak. His eyes held hers, calm but challenging, as if he already knew her answer. "I don't think anything anymore," she whispered finally. "I just see you." A smile ghosted across his lips. Small, real, and dangerous. "Good," he said softly. "Because I see you too." The clock ticked somewhere in the background, but neither moved. The air between them felt alive, like something had just shifted, something impossible to undo. He stepped back slightly, his voice calm again. "Go home, Amira, before this office forgets it's a workplace." She smiled, her heart racing. "Good night, sir." "Good night," he murmured as she walked away. She could still feel his gaze, warm, steady, and full of something unspoken. And that night, when she closed her eyes, it wasn't silence that filled her head. It was his voice, his smile, and the spark that had finally caught fire. The next few days brought a different kind of silence to the office. Not peaceful, not calm, but watchful. Something invisible lingered in the air, something that made people lower their voices when Adrian walked by and glance at Amira when they thought she wasn't looking. It started small, a few curious looks, an extra long pause when her name was mentioned in meetings, a whisper here and there in the hallway. Then it began to spread, like perfume carried by air, soft but impossible to ignore. By midweek, everyone had heard some version of it. "Did you see them together after hours?" "He treats her differently." Maybe that rumor about him wasn't true after all. Amira could feel it, the shift in the way people looked at her. Some smiles were polite but distant now, others sharp with curiosity. It wasn't cruel, not yet, but it was uncomfortable. She tried to act normal, to laugh when others laughed, to keep her head down and focus on work. But every whisper felt louder than the ticking clock. That morning, as she reached for her coffee, she overheard two voices by the pantry. Maybe she's special to him. Or maybe she just thinks she is. Her hand froze mid-air. The spoon slipped and clinked against the counter. She turned around slowly. The two women, from accounting, smiled awkwardly when they saw her. "Oh, Amira, we were just—" "It's fine," she interrupted softly. "You don't have to explain." But her voice trembled just enough to betray her. She went back to her desk, staring at her screen without seeing a single word. Her throat felt tight, her chest heavy. She hated this feeling, being the subject of gossip, of assumptions, of lies that grew from something so innocent. She didn't even know what this was, what existed between her and Adrian. It wasn't romance, not really, not yet. It was something delicate, unspoken, made of stolen glances and quiet conversations, and now it felt like the world was tearing it apart before it could even bloom. She looked toward his office. He was there, as always, and calm, unreadable. If he knew about the rumors, he didn't show it. But that only made it worse. At lunchtime, she stayed at her desk, pretending to work. The rain outside returned, tapping softly on the windows, blending with the low hum of the office. Then, a shadow fell across her desk. "Not hungry today?" She looked up. Adrian stood there, holding a cup of coffee. His expression was gentle, but his eyes, those quiet, piercing eyes, searched hers carefully. "I wasn't feeling it," she said softly. He set the coffee down beside her. "You look tired." I'm fine, Amira, he said quietly, leaning closer. You're not, she swallowed hard, lowering her voice. People are talking, his jaw tightened. For the first time, something sharp flashed across his face. Not anger at her, but at the situation. I know, he said finally, you know? She whispered, surprised. He nodded slowly. It happens when people don't understand what they see. Her chest ached. They're saying things about you, about me. It's not fair. His voice softened, but his tone was steady. Fairness doesn't live in offices, Amira, but truth does, at least between us. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. And what is the truth? For a long moment he didn't answer. The world around them faded and the sound of keyboards, phones, footsteps, until there was only the quiet beat of her heart. Then he said, that I respect you, that I care how you feel, and that's enough truth for now. Her lips parted, but no words came. He straightened his tie, his tone calm again. Ignore them. People talk until they find something else to feed on, and with that, he turned and walked back to his office, composed, distant, unshaken. But she wasn't as strong. All afternoon, her mind replayed his words. I care how you feel. They were simple, but they held something deeper. Something that made her heart both ache and flutter at once. By the end of the day, she decided she couldn't keep quiet anymore. When most of the office had emptied, she knocked gently on his door. He looked up, surprised. Amira? Can I come in? Of course. She closed the door behind her, taking a deep breath. I needed to ask. He waited silently, his gaze patient but alert. Why do you stay calm about everything? About what they say, what they think? Adrian leaned back slightly, his voice low. Because if I reacted every time people misunderstood me, I'd never stop reacting. Peace, Amira, isn't silence, it's control. She frowned. But doesn't it hurt? He paused. Sometimes, he admitted quietly. But I've learned to live with the ache. Her heart squeezed. You don't have to. He looked at her, really looked. And for a moment, something in his eyes softened completely. No one's ever said that to me before. The rain outside grew heavier, echoing through the glass. The light in the room was dim now, wrapping them in a soft golden glow. Amira stepped closer, her voice trembling but brave. Then let someone say it now. The silence between them felt alive again, charged, fragile, impossible to ignore. He took a slow breath, and when he spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. You shouldn't care this much, Amira. Maybe I shouldn't, she said softly. But I do. The air between them shifted again, warmer, closer. He didn't move, but the look in his eyes said everything that words couldn't. Finally, he said, Go home, before this becomes something it shouldn't. She nodded slowly, her heart pounding. Good night. Good night, he said, his voice softer than the rain. As she left, she could still feel his gaze, heavy, quiet, full of everything he couldn't say. And outside, under the rain, she realized the rumors hadn't been wrong about one thing. Something was happening between them. Something real. Something neither of them could stop anymore. The rain didn't stop that night. It kept falling, soft but endless, whispering against windows, soaking the streets below. When Amira arrived at the office the next morning, the world still looked gray and quiet, as if even the city hadn't found the courage to wake up fully. Inside, the lights flickered gently across the floor. The office was nearly empty, only a few early workers and the soft hum of the coffee machine. She set her bag down and took a slow breath. The air felt heavy today, charged with something she couldn't name. Her eyes drifted automatically toward Adrian's office. The door was closed, but the light was on. He was there. She could feel it, the familiar pull, the quiet awareness that had grown between them like a secret rhythm. For the last few days, their conversations had been shorter, their glances fewer. The whispers around them hadn't stopped, and maybe that silence between them had been their way of keeping safe. But it didn't feel safe anymore. It felt suffocating. So when her phone buzzed with a short message, "See me in my office when you have a moment," her heart began to race. She waited a few minutes before walking in. The door clicked softly behind her. He was standing near the window, looking out at the rain. His reflection in the glass was calm, but his shoulders carried something heavier. When he turned, his eyes met hers, steady, unreadable, but softer than usual. "Amira," he said quietly. "Close the door," she did. The room felt smaller instantly. The only sounds were the gentle ticking of the clock and the faint patter of rain outside. He walked to his desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Her pulse quickened. "Is it about the rumors?" He nodded. "Partly." Then, after a pause, "But not only that." Amira waited, her hands trembling slightly where they rested at her sides. He took a slow breath, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've heard things being said. I've ignored them, for both our sakes. But what I can't ignore is how this has affected you." "It hasn't," she started, but he cut her off gently. "It has," he said, his voice low but certain. "You've been quieter. You avoid people. You barely look at me in meetings anymore." Her throat tightened. "I didn't want to make things harder for you." His eyes softened. "You never have." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air felt fragile, like one wrong word could break it completely. Finally, she whispered, "Then why does it feel like we're both pretending?" Adrian froze. The question hung there, heavy and brave. He looked at her, really looked, and the calm mask he always wore began to fade. His voice was softer now, almost hesitant. "Because pretending is safer." "But it's not honest," she said, taking a step closer. "And I think we've both had enough of silence." Her words broke something in the room. The quiet turned into something alive, filled with heartbeats, memories, and the weight of everything they hadn't said. He exhaled slowly. "Amira, the night we stayed late, when you looked at me across that desk, I knew then that something was changing. I told myself to stop it before it grew." "Did you?" she asked gently. He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "No." The admission hit her like a wave, quiet but powerful. He stepped closer now, each movement slow, careful. "I tried to stay the person I'm supposed to be. Your boss, your mentor, the one who keeps distance. But every time you walk into a room, every time you smile, I forget the line I'm supposed to stay behind." Amira's breath caught. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She took another step forward, her voice trembling but certain. Then maybe the line shouldn't be there anymore. His eyes searched hers, the storm in them now visible. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do," she whispered. "I know what I feel. I tried to ignore it too, but it's there. Every time you look at me, every time you say my name like it means something." He closed his eyes briefly, as if the sound of her words hurt and healed him at once. "Amira," she reached out, her hand brushing his sleeve. A simple touch, but it felt like crossing a bridge she'd been standing on for weeks. "Tell me it's just in my head," she said softly. "Tell me none of this is real, and I'll walk out that door right now." The silence that followed was deafening. He opened his eyes, and for the first time all the restraint, all the calm, all the control, it was gone. What replaced it was raw, human, and trembling. He stepped closer until they were only inches apart. The faint scent of his cologne, the warmth of his breath, the soft echo of rain, everything felt like a single heartbeat stretched between them. "I can't say that," he said quietly. Her eyes glistened. "Then don't." He reached up as if to touch her, but stopped halfway, his hand frozen in the air. "If I start this, Amira, I won't be able to stop." She smiled faintly through the trembling. "Then maybe we shouldn't stop pretending." For a second he said nothing, only stared at her, his breath shallow, his expression torn between reason and want. Then slowly he lowered his hand, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. The sound of the rain grew louder, the world outside forgotten. Finally, he whispered, "This can't be love." Amira looked at him, her voice soft but certain. "Then why does it feel like it?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable, undeniable, and though no one moved, something changed. The air between them, once filled with restraint, now burned with unspoken truth. He stepped back finally, his face shadowed with emotion. "Go home, Amira," he said gently, "before we both forget where we are." She hesitated, her heart screaming to stay, but nodded slowly. "Good night, sir." "Good night," he murmured. As she turned and left, the echo of her footsteps faded into the soft music of rain. Adrian stood still, his reflection in the glass showing a man who had finally said too much and not enough at the same time. And outside his office, Amira walked down the dim hallway with tears in her eyes and a strange new light in her heart. Because for the first time, the truth was out, and there was no going back. The office felt different after that night. Not in the way people could see, Anad, everything looked the same. Screens glowing, phones ringing, papers stacked neatly on desks. But underneath, something had changed. Something unspoken but alive. Amira could feel it in the way the air shifted when Adrian entered the room, in how her pulse quickened whenever their eyes met. They didn't speak much now, but the silence between them carried more weight than words ever could. He had drawn the line again, carefully and firmly. But she could tell he was standing right beside it, struggling not to cross. That morning she arrived early, hoping to breathe before the day began. The office was empty, sunlight just starting to paint soft gold across the floors. She poured herself coffee and stood by the window watching the city wake up. Cars crawling, people hurrying, clouds moving slow and heavy. She didn't hear him at first. Couldn't sleep either. His voice was calm, quiet, but she felt it before she turned. Adrian stood near the door, jacket off, tie loose, his hair slightly messy, the look of someone who'd fought thoughts instead of dreams. Amira smiled faintly, though her heart beat faster. Not much. He walked in slowly, each step measured, careful, like he was testing the air between them. "It's too early for both of us to be here," he said. "Maybe we both needed silence," she replied softly. He gave a quiet chuckle. "Maybe we did." For a few moments they stood side by side near the window, the city below them alive and distant. The hum of the air conditioner filled the room, soft and steady. Then, without looking at her, he said, "About what happened the other day. I shouldn't have said those things." Amira looked down at her cup. "You mean the truth?" he sighed. "The truth can be dangerous when it lives in the wrong place." She turned to face him, her voice trembling but strong. "But what if it's in the right place at just the wrong time?" That made him look at her, really look. The question lingered in the air, pulling him closer in a way neither of them could control. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence stretched, warm, delicate, electric. Finally he spoke, barely above a whisper. "You don't understand what this could cost." "I don't care," she said simply. "Not if it's real." Her words hit him like a confession he'd been waiting for and dreading all at once. He stepped closer, just a little. "You shouldn't say that. But I mean it," she whispered. "I've never said something more honestly." Their eyes met, and the world seemed to fall away. The sound of rain, the ticking clock, the faint hum of machines, everything faded until there was only this strange, magnetic quiet between them. He wanted to look away, but he didn't. Instead, he said, "You make it hard to stay who I'm supposed to be." Amira's lips curved into a sad smile. "Maybe you're supposed to be someone else." He exhaled slowly, his hand tightening on the edge of the desk. Every muscle in his body told him to move, to step back, to rebuild the wall he'd already let crumble once. But his heart, that quiet, stubborn part of him, whispered otherwise. "I've spent years keeping everything under control," he said, voice low, every word, every thought, every feeling. "Then you walked in, and suddenly I don't know how to be calm anymore." Her eyes softened. "Then don't be calm." He looked at her, really looked, and something broke in him. He took another step closer, the air between them charged like static. "You think this is easy for me?" he said quietly. "You think I haven't tried to push you away?" "I know you have," she said, her voice gentle. "But you didn't," his breath caught. For a long moment they just stood there, two people standing too close, pretending it was an accident. Amira's hands trembled around her cup. "Say something," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "I can't stop thinking about you." The words were out before he could stop them. Real, raw, irreversible. Her heart skipped. "Then don't." A half laugh escaped him, helpless, shaky, filled with everything he'd been holding back. He rubbed his temples, trying to find sense in a moment that had already lost it. "You don't know what you're doing to me." She took one small step closer. "Maybe I do." He stared at her, the woman who had been his peace and his chaos all at once, and for the first time he didn't hide behind silence. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was feather-light, hesitant, almost scared, but it was enough to shatter every wall between them. Her breath hitched. She didn't pull away, For a few seconds, the world was only the warmth of that touch, quiet, trembling, full of everything they weren't saying. Then, as if realizing what he'd done, he stepped back sharply. The spell broke. "This isn't right," he said softly, his voice shaking. "I can't do this to you." Amira blinked away the sting in her eyes. "You're not doing anything to me," she whispered. "You're just being honest." He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. "Honesty has consequences." "Then I'll face them," she said quietly. "With you." He opened his eyes again, and the look in them was different now. Tender, tired, full of longing. "You make it sound so easy." She smiled faintly, though her voice trembled. "Nothing about this is easy, but it's real." He took a slow breath, his heart pounding loud enough that she could almost hear it. "Amira, if I reach for you again, I don't think I'll stop." Her voice came out as a whisper. "Then maybe it's time you didn't stop." The clock ticked softly. The rain outside grew lighter. He didn't move. Neither did she. But something had shifted. A silent promise, fragile and bright, born out of all the words they couldn't say. When she finally turned to leave, he didn't stop her. But his eyes followed her every step, and hers found him again in the reflection of the glass. Two people caught in a pull neither of them wanted to escape. And for the first time, Adrian Hale, the calm, controlled man, let his heart be loud. The evening air was heavy with rain again, the kind that carried a deep rhythm, soft and constant, like a quiet heartbeat against the windows. Most of the office lights were off now, except for a few glowing screens and one desk lamp in the corner room that refused to sleep. Amira sat alone at her desk, pretending to finish a file she had already completed an hour ago. But her eyes weren't on the words. Her mind wasn't on the work. It was on him. Adrian's words from that morning replayed endlessly in her head. "If I reach for you again, I don't think I'll stop." He hadn't meant for her to hear the tenderness behind them, but she had. Every syllable had stayed with her, clinging to her heartbeat. She glanced up, and there he was, still in his office, jacket off, the soft lamplight outlining his face. He looked exhausted, one hand pressed against his forehead, eyes closed as if trying to silence his thoughts. Before she could stop herself, she stood and walked toward him. Her heels clicked softly on the floor, a sound too loud in the empty space. She hesitated at his door, then knocked gently. He looked up immediately. "Amira," he said, voice tired but warm. "You're still here." "So are you," she replied quietly. He smiled faintly. "I thought you'd gone home." She shook her head. "I couldn't." He studied her face. Calm, curious, but there was something fragile in his eyes too. "Is something wrong?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Yes and no." He motioned toward the chair. "Sit." She didn't. Instead, she stepped closer to his desk. "I just wanted to talk, before this silence between us grows again." He leaned back, folding his arms, watching her carefully. "You think silence is our enemy?" "I think it's what we hide behind," she said gently. "And I'm tired of hiding." The rain outside deepened, tapping steadily against the glass. It filled the room with a rhythm that matched the soft tremor in her voice. Adrian exhaled slowly. "Amira," she met his gaze, steady, brave. "You said something this morning, about not being able to stop if you reached for me again." He went still. The faint sound of his breath caught. "I remember," her voice softened. "Then why didn't you?" He looked down, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips, pained, restrained. "Because I knew I shouldn't." "But you wanted to," she whispered. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. He looked up again, his eyes darker now. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't?" He stopped, the rest of his sentence lost to the weight in the room. "Then say it," she said, taking another step closer. He rose from his chair slowly, his movements deliberate, almost cautious. "You don't know what you're asking me to say." "Yes, I do." Their eyes locked. The air between them shifted, dense and warm. The faint hum of the lamp, the slow beat of rain, the sound of their breathing. It all blended into one fragile silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost trembling. "You make me forget who I'm supposed to be." Her heart twisted. "And who are you supposed to be?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the tiny flicker of light reflected in his eyes. "Someone who doesn't do this," And yet, she whispered, here you are. Neither moved for a long moment. The tension between them felt like a wire stretched too tight, ready to snap. His hand lifted, hesitating midway, then gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. The touch was light, almost accidental, but it burned. Her eyes fluttered shut, her breath uneven. He didn't pull away. His hand lingered for a moment longer, tracing the edge of her cheek before falling slowly to his side. Amira, he murmured, her name leaving his lips like a confession. She opened her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Tell me you don't want to. He swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling too fast. I can't, and that was all it took. Their breaths mingled, close, trembling. The world outside disappeared. The rain became a song only they could hear. He leaned in, slow, unsure, like a man walking toward something sacred and forbidden at the same time. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The space between them grew smaller and smaller until only a breath separated them. His eyes closed halfway. Hers did too. For one heartbeat, the world stopped. But then, he froze. His hand, which had been reaching for her, fell to his side again. His jaw clenched, his breathing unsteady. No, he whispered. If I cross this line, there's no going back. Amira's voice trembled. We already crossed it. He stepped back slowly, forcing the distance, though his eyes betrayed the ache he tried to hide. You don't understand what this could cost you. She looked at him, not angry, not hurt, just heartbreakingly calm. I already know what it's costing me to stay away. The words hit him like truth he didn't want to hear. He turned away, gripping the edge of his desk, his reflection shaking faintly in the window. You deserve better than this. Better than me. She took a deep breath, her voice soft but strong. Don't decide that for me. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain slowed, fading into a drizzle, leaving behind a quiet that felt too full to bear. Finally, he said without turning around, please go home. Amira, before I forget why I shouldn't stop. She stood there for a moment, her chest tight, her heart heavy, and then whispered, good night. Adrian. It was the first time she'd said his name aloud. He froze, his shoulders tense but didn't turn. Amira walked to the door, each step slow, quiet, final. She paused once more, looking back. The man she saw wasn't her boss. He was just a man fighting himself. She left without another word. When the door closed, Adrian pressed his palms against the desk and lowered his head, the quiet breaking around him like glass. The kiss hadn't happened, but its absence burned more deeply than it ever could have if it had. The next morning arrived quietly, but it didn't feel like morning at all. It felt like an ending disguised as a beginning. The sky was pale and still, and the city moved slower than usual, as if even time had lost its energy. Amira walked into the office with a heavy heart. The air inside felt colder, sharper. Conversations that usually filled the room seemed distant now, fading into background noise. She carried her usual coffee, but it tasted bitter today, like it had absorbed the unease sitting in her chest. Adrian's office door was closed. That in itself wasn't unusual, but the stillness behind it was. Normally she could hear the soft click of his pen, the faint shuffle of papers, the low hum of his voice during calls. Today there was nothing. Lena stopped by her desk, whispering, He's been quiet all morning. Even skipped the team check-in. Maybe something's wrong? Amira just nodded, her throat too tight to answer. Something was wrong, she could feel it. She had felt it since last night, when the almost kiss had ended with silence and the soft echo of her own footsteps walking away. By noon, her nerves couldn't take it anymore. She walked toward his office, her heart pounding like a soft drum beneath her ribs. She knocked gently. Come in, came his voice, calm but distant. She pushed the door open. Adrian was sitting behind his desk, but the sight made her stop cold. His desk was almost bare. Files neatly stacked, drawers slightly open, and his nameplate turned upside down. She blinked. What's going on? He looked up at her slowly, his eyes tired, not from work but from something deeper. Amira, he said softly. Close the door. The sound of her heartbeat drowned out everything else. She obeyed, stepping inside with hesitant steps. You're leaving. It wasn't a question, it was instinct, the kind that hurts before it's confirmed. He nodded once. There's been a transfer. I'm moving to the head office downtown. When? Her voice cracked. Tomorrow morning. The room fell silent. The ticking clock felt louder than ever. She stared at him, trying to find some trace of the calm man she knew. But he wasn't calm now. He looked like someone trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked quietly. He hesitated. Because I didn't know how to. Amira stepped closer, her hands trembling. You could have just said it, he gave a small, sad smile. If I said it earlier, I wouldn't have gone through with it. Her breath caught. So you're running away? He didn't deny it. Maybe I am. Maybe that's what people like me do when things get too real. Her voice trembled. Too real. Is that what this was, and something to escape from? He looked down at his desk. No, he said softly. That's exactly why I have to go. The air between them was heavy again, filled with words unsaid, with memories that didn't belong to time. She could almost hear the echo of the rain from the night before still living between them. Adrian, she whispered, you said if you reached for me again, you wouldn't stop. He closed his eyes. I remember. So why not reach for me now? He stood then, slowly, his voice quiet but full of ache. Because if I do, I'll never let go. And I can't be that selfish. Her eyes burned. But you already let go. You did it when you walked away. He looked at her, his expression breaking. The calm mask gone, replaced with raw emotion. Do you think this is easy for me? No, she whispered. But you're still doing it. He turned toward the window, rain beginning to fall again, as if the world knew how to match their mood. This isn't the life I wanted, Amira, he said. But it's the one I chose, and you? You deserve something better than stolen moments in empty offices. She took another step forward, her voice trembling. And what if I don't want better? What if all I want is you? He turned back to her, and for the first time his calmness shattered completely. His eyes glistened. Don't say that, he said hoarsely. Please, why not? Because if you do, he said, his voice breaking, I won't be able to leave. The silence after that was unbearable. Finally, he walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. So close, too close. The same distance they'd almost erased before. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against hers in that same soft, trembling touch that had haunted both of them since the night they almost crossed the line. This isn't goodbye forever, he said quietly, but it has to be goodbye for now. Her tears fell then, silently, sliding down her cheeks like raindrops against glass. Will I ever see you again? He hesitated, his thumb brushing one tear away, a touch both tender and final. If life is kind, she smiled through the tears. You don't believe in kindness. He shook his head softly. Not until you. For a long moment, neither moved. The rain grew heavier outside, the sound of it filling the space where words had failed. Finally, he let her hand go, slowly, carefully, like letting go of something too fragile to break quickly. Take care of yourself, Amira, he said gently, and don't stop being the light you are. Her voice trembled. And you? Don't stop fighting the quiet, he smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts to wear. Goodbye, she whispered it back. Goodbye. When she walked out of his office, the world felt different, quieter, emptier, as if even the air knew what had just ended. Behind her, Adrian stood at the window watching her reflection fade from the glass. The rain blurred everything, the city, the lights, his thoughts, until all that was left was the ache of something beautiful and unfinished. He whispered her name once, softly to the empty room, and for the first time in years, he didn't hide the tremble in his voice. The days that followed felt longer than they should have. The office still looked the same desks, the same coffee smell, the same hum of printers and quiet chatter. But for Amira, nothing was the same anymore. Adrian's office was empty now. His nameplate was gone. The blinds were open, letting in too much light, and that single lamp he always left on at night had been unplugged. The emptiness of that space was louder than any goodbye. For a while, she expected him to walk back in. Every time the elevator chimed, she looked up, waiting to see his tall frame and calm eyes appear through the glass. But he never came. The door stayed closed. The chair stayed empty. The company sent out an email a few days later, polite and cold. Mr. Hale has been transferred to our main office. We wish him continued success in his new role. No one said much after that. The whispers faded quickly. People moved on. But Amira couldn't. Not yet. She stayed late again sometimes, not because of work, but because silence had become her only way to be close to him. She would sit by her desk, staring at the glow of her screen, pretending she was waiting for an email or a file. But in truth, she was just waiting for the sound of his voice in her head to fade, and it never did. She still remembered his last words, "Don't stop being the light you are." And she tried. She really did. But some nights, when the city outside turned silver under the rain, she would find herself whispering his name just once, into the quiet, as if the walls might still remember him. Months passed. Seasons changed. The air grew warmer, then colder again. The world kept moving. And then one morning a new name appeared on the glass door of the manager's office. Mr. Bennett, a new boss. A new start. The man was polite, young, and eager to lead. But to Amira, he was just another part of the world moving forward without her. She smiled when expected to, spoke when spoken to, and buried her heart under layers of work and quiet composure. But she had learned something from Adrian. That silence can hide anything, even love. One rainy Friday, almost a year later, she was sorting through old folders in the archive room when a small envelope fell out from between the papers. Her breath caught as she picked it up. Her name was written on the front, in his handwriting. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a short note. Just a few lines written with the same steady hand she knew so well. "Amira, if you're reading this, it means I never said everything I should have. I left to protect us, but every day since I've wondered if leaving was the real mistake. You once asked if peace and chaos can live together. You were right, they can. You were both for me. If our paths cross again, I hope I'll be brave enough to stay this time. A.H." Her eyes blurred as she read it again and again, her tears falling silently onto the paper. The words were soft, careful, but they held everything he couldn't say back then. Every feeling, every truth. She pressed the note to her chest, closing her eyes. And for a moment it was like he was there again, standing beside her, his voice quiet, his presence calm. Outside, thunder rolled softly, followed by the gentle sound of rain, steady, rhythmic, familiar. She smiled through her tears. That evening she walked out of the office into the city rain. The world was shimmering with reflections, lights dancing on puddles, cars moving slow, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers on the street. She stood there for a long moment, letting the rain fall on her face. It didn't sting this time. It felt like something washing her clean, something giving her permission to remember without breaking. In her pocket, the letter stayed folded neatly, a quiet promise from the past that still pulsed with warmth. Sometimes, she still thought about what could have been, the conversations that would never happen, the mornings they would never share. But instead of pain, it brought a strange kind of peace, because not every love story needs to end with forever. Some just need to exist, once beautifully enough to change everything. A month later, she transferred to a new department. New team, new desk, new view. The first morning there, she unpacked her things slowly. When she reached for her notepad, something fell from the back cover. That same sticky note from so long ago. "Good work on the report. You made my job easier. A.H." She smiled. Really smiled. For the first time in a while. She pressed it flat on her desk like a quiet charm. A reminder that even brief connections can leave forever marks. Outside the window, the rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering across the skyline. Somewhere in that same city, maybe blocks away, maybe miles, a man with gray eyes might have looked out another window at the same light and thought of her too. Neither of them knew for sure. But in that moment, it didn't matter, because some stories don't need an ending, just a memory strong enough to live in both hearts, and theirs would, always.